Alright, next I'm going to start showing the applications for the Bil Jee form. Now the Bil Jee form starts the same way as the other two forms up to this point. And that's already been explained in the previous tapes. And again, we could leave off the end of the Cheung Q form and this part of the Bil Jee form to link them together so that we could do the form in one long continuous set of motions instead of stopping and starting each time, repeating the Hoi 6 sequence. So the first real difference in the Bil Jee form is during the first punch. Because what I do is I cock my hip backwards and then half pivot punch. Now, after that I do open my hand and do some other things, but let's just talk about the Huin Sao itself here closing, and then again I chamber my hip and pivot punch. So I'm getting that extra in my hip that I didn't do in the previous two forms. In Cheung Q, all I did was just pivot from where it was. In Bil Jee, you're actually turning the hip more to start with and then unloading like that. That's to get a little bit of extra power when you know it's safe to do so. And sometimes you don't actually pivot, but you use your hip instead of a pivot. Say, for example, we were closed. In a situation like this, when the first punch came in, I used Tanda. All I used was my hips to power that. And that chambered them so that I could unload that hip cock as I threw that second shot. See, my hips did the action of pivoting. And again, they untwisted for that shot. So that would be my hip opening to chamber and then closing to hit. If we were open, the same technique here, my hip was closing to chamber and then opening for the hit. So you use like an abbreviated pivot. Now, I remember I showed you in the second form and the first form, say we're closed, the idea of punching and then opening and pull punch. Okay, that was hidden in the first form. In the second form, it was the same thing but with a pivot. Pivot punch, grab, pivot punch. In the Bil Jee form, that closure of the hand that we're doing can simulate a flesh grab, which I'm going to show you some more of in a minute. But if used with the trauma punch, the same way it's done in the form, it might look like this. Punch, grab some flesh. Now what I'm doing here is I'm punching and grabbing onto the meat of his arm. So you can see I got a hold of his skin. It's not like you're grabbing the whole arm anymore. You dig your fingers in. So you could use it that way. Alright, next I'm going to talk about Tang Ji, the springing fingers. So from the punch position, I brace my fingernails against my thumb, and I unload my fingers in a springy unload. Now the way I would use that motion, for example, when we're open, if I had gotten the punch here, I might go from the lock punch. If I did make contact and pushed him back, I can meet him with those spring fingers. So again, at speed, it's here, push the head back, and then meet the head with the springing fingers. Now, at times you get blocked, but very close to the guy's face. For example, the same situation here, but he blocks very close to his face. I can use that to hit the eyes with my fingers. Or even, instead of hitting from there, I could just spring my fingers open and then stab with them, using them as a Bil Jee type of motion. Alright, next I'm going to talk about what's called Ngan Wun, alternating wrist snap. I go up, down, then I circle. I go in, out, circle. Now, you notice that my arm stays completely bent or completely locked, and my wrist does all the work. This is to help you develop a lot of snap in your wrist. They do it while isolating the wrist by keeping your arm locked. You don't have to always have your arm completely locked, but that develops the power. Now, the one where I go side to side could be a couple of things. It could be against a 1-2 here. What I would do is snap my wrist one way and then the other. So I went here and then there. And then that helps me to attack. Another way of using that same side-to-side snap of the wrist would be against one punch here. Use that as the unload of the chop. So the one hand snapped in to block and then snapped out to hit. So you get a lot more snap with your wrist. Now the up-down one, the same idea. Against the high-low, up and then down, and follow up. So again, I went up here, then down there, and then here. Or it could have been the other way around. It could have been down first, then up. Then move in with whatever shot you're going to do. So it's just teaching you to use your hand that way. Or against a single shot, it might just be down, and then up could be actually a hit, using the edge of the wrist. So you have different ways of using your hand that way. Now the actually hidden application for these wrist movements is to use your forearm to strike, or your wrist as a strike. Sometimes what I'll do is use this motion here to simulate a wrist hit. For example, we're open. Gavin gives me the jab. Here, once I've hammer fisted, I can use that to actually strike that snap of my wrist. And I'll either hit the neck, the side of the neck here, or the side of the head. You can use it anywhere in there. So you use the wrist snapping action to hit him with. Another way you might use the forearm or the wrist bent like this is to simulate grabbing the back of the neck. Example, let's say that the first shot came in, jab, the second one, say I went here from the chop, I used that to reverse grab the guy's neck to set up for elbow shots or other things. So turning your hand out like that simulates grabbing the person's neck. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Bil Jee form of Huynh Sao, which is different from Siu Lim Tao or Chum Kiu Huynh Sao. Siu Lim Tao Huynh Sao, we just snapped, waited till we were pointed at the floor, and then closed. Chum Kiu Huynh Sao, we held the hand open, snapped, circled out past the center, and snapped across. Bil Jee Huynh Sao, you snap, circle past the center, squeeze your hand, squeeze it flat, squeeze, release, to develop your grip and strengthen the forearm, and at the same time to simulate different types of grabbing, different than what you did at Siu Lim Tao or Chum Kiu. For example, with the flesh grabs that we would do in Bil Jee, the idea is to grab with the fingers and squeeze. Now, like I showed before, when I punched and he blocked, I could grab onto some flesh and pull the guy into the strike. I mean, sometimes the punch comes and I hit the body and then grab onto some flesh there and hit, grab onto some flesh there, hit. So you can actually get a hold of flesh. Again, from here, once I've hit here, grab onto some flesh. Grab from here, grab onto the skin, pulling him into the shot. There's different ways. Another example for the 1-2, here, once I've hit in a position like this, I might grab the flesh underneath the arm and pull him into a shot. Now I'm grabbing the throat. So these kind of grabs are very painful. You can use them in emergency situations. Say I'm being choked. Guy's choking you. Get a hold of some meat, pull onto it until he lets you go. Another idea is once he's grabbing you like that, grab here. It's also very painful and it makes a person want to let you go. On the ground, the same types of things. Person sitting on top of you. When I go down, you know, sometimes you're being choked with things. You can get out of certain types of locks by grabbing onto the meat, causing some pain to the opponent. Even grabbing onto his face or grabbing onto the cheek like that. So anytime you can get a hold of some meat in an emergency situation, sometimes that's what you have to do. Inside of the thigh is very sensitive. Inside of the bicep is very sensitive. Okay, now that can also simulate grabbing a person's hair. Sometimes you'll grab their hair and pull them into a shot, or grab their clothing and pull them into a punch. If you grab a hold of the guy's sleeve and pull him in, or grab a hold of his collar to choke him, those are all considered applications for this movement. All right, next I'm going to talk about Guai Jian, the downward arcing elbow strike. Now, there's a couple of different ways I like to use this one. For example, one of the times I like to do it, say we're closed. In a situation where I've gone pak da and he blocks me, I can use it to crawl over the top. So, for example, from here, I go right over, down, and then up, so that opens them up. Now, I also use it as what's called ding jiang or butting elbow. In certain situations, say for example, I've come in here and he blocked it, I've come in there, and I've trapped that arm. I can use that to butt him with my elbow, stepping in and hitting him with the point of the elbow without letting go of the arm. So that's one of the ways I like to use that movement. Another way I like to use it, for example, say I punched and he blocks. Here, I'll step in, arcing elbow, right to the head. Now, if he managed to block that, here, that's what that second one is for. Again, grabbing, just like in the form. Now, if you notice in the form, I do this, and then at the end, I shoot through like that. So, after having done this, I go into this Biu Sao. Now, that could be, for example, if I had punched and he blocked, and I went here and he did block that one, I could just shoot Biu through right there, and then Biu again, just as it is in the form. If, for example, again, here, I shot Biu through and he blocked me, then I could shoot Biu through that way. See? That's another way I might try it. So you can see what happened there is I here, shot through again. That type of a threading Biu is used in a lot of different situations. Whereas before, say we were open, I showed you that when he punches here and he blocks this, I showed you to run and then retrap. Or I showed you that you could pull down and punch. In Bil Jee, they teach you that you can Biu through. So that's another way of getting away from his Wu Sao. So there's a couple of different ways we can use that. Some other ways that I use my elbow in the Guai Jiang structure is to protect against different types of attacks. For example, when Gavin pulls and tries to elbow the side of my head here, what I might use is Guai Jiang to stop it there. So the point of my elbow goes right into his forearm and it's sort of painful. Then I can follow up with different types of strikes. Now, I also use it to protect against a headbutt. An example of that is when Gavin, gets the back of my neck and he's going to headbutt me. There. what I can do at the last minute is drive that in, and that'll protect against the headbutt. He ends up butting into the end of my elbow. So I can use it there. I call that a nose cone defense. In certain emergency situations, like when you're dazed or you've been hit for whatever reason, you're off balance, you can use a nose cone to defend against the guy's punch. An example would be if I'd already been hit and I was a little bit dazed, and he's going to give me the big punch right in the nose. Instead of just standing there and getting hit, what I can do is cover up and put my elbow up in front of my nose. That gives me a little bit of protection. So he's either going to hit right on my elbow, or he's going to glance off and hit the top of my head. Either way, it's better for me than getting hit right in the face. It's not the best block in the world. You don't like to block punches with your head in Wing Chun, but it's better than getting hit. Same thing from when you're on the ground. If I'm down here and Gavin's going to punch me, I can protect again by getting my elbow up in front of my face. So I can use it in that way. Even if the other hand was coming, it wouldn't matter to me. I'm just protecting, and even if he bounces off and hits the top of my head, it's not a problem for me. So I'd rather get hit on top of the head than in the face anytime. So I use it there to protect myself in emergency situations. Now if you notice in the form, I come in here, and then I have my other hand chambered, and then I shoot here, and then I shoot another busa. Now that can be used in a lot of different ways. Say we're closed. If he gets the punch, and I block it here, I can then grab on and step in, hit him there. Now you see how my hand is underneath? It's very much like the form, so I could shoot through with the busa and another busa. So in that way, all I did was stop it, hit, shoot, and shoot. Okay, now it could have been that he tried to stop my elbow. Once he punched here and he stopped that, then if I wanted to, I could shoot through here and then shoot through again. Or if he stopped my elbow here, I could shoot through, and if he blocks that, then I could shoot through again there. So that's another way I might use that movement. In fact, if we're open and he uses wusa to stop my chop, let's say from the punch, he blocks me there. Well, I showed you earlier that you could pull down and punch at Siu Tao level, and I showed you that you could run into that. And at Bil Jee level, you could then, from right here, bu through. That's what that idea is right there. So there's a number of different ways that might work. All right, some of the other ways that I use that movement of coming out from underneath with Bu, one of them is in Chiso. If my opponent is attempting to trap me here, I can use that busa instead of just getting hit right there. I can use it to get out from underneath. So as I feel the trap forming, I can bu through and then follow up. So that's one of the ways I use that. Another is, say for example, we're closed, and I come in with a hot punch and he stops me there. That grab from underneath comes from that movement because I'm clearing from under my own hand. See, if I go here and I grab from over the top, if Gavin drops his hand, I'll be trapped. But instead, when I go here, if I grab from underneath and he drops his hand, that's what I want. So it's important to grab from underneath in certain situations. I also use that sneaky busa from underneath, like in sticky hands. If I want to attack from the low foot, I might just shoot bu here and then come in. So what I did is, right from underneath, shot, stepped in, and then finished it. All right, next I'm going to talk about Saokun. Now the retracting elbow. And I've shown you how we use the backward elbow in earlier levels, but in Bil Jee, we think about it more on the ground. Now for example, when I'm in a situation where we're both on the ground, say I'm being headlocked or choked or whatever on the ground here, I tend to use my backward elbow this way, or once I'm down, I like to use it cutting back here. If I have to roll through, I like to roll through and use that elbow as I spin. So that's some of the ways that I use the Saokun on the floor. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Bil Jee Ma, or Yip Man motion. Most importantly, this is teaching us how to glide the foot or stay light on our feet and rub the floor with the foot rather than pick it up. All right, now we use it in a lot of different ways. The first way I'm going to show you is to avoid the opponent's leg. For example, when I'm open and I've done, against the punch here, in a position like this, if I want to get to the inside, what I don't want to do is just step over because I might trip over his foot. So in a situation like this, I might want to use my footwork to get inside his leg so that I can get control. So I actually step out and around his leg. All right, I also use the Yip Man footwork to help me avoid being kicked in the leg. For example, here, when he goes to front kick against my rear leg, what I could do instead is sidestep in and around that. That puts me inside in good position to hit from. What I don't want to do is just stand there and let it kick my leg. So this way I can avoid by sidestepping and going in. All right, another way I can use the Yip Man is from an open relationship like this. I can step off to the side and step inside to get his triangle. It gets his weight. In other words, everybody can imagine having a triangle right in front of them and right behind them. And when you push the opponent towards the tip of either triangle, he's weaker. So if I can get to the inside here and apply pressure towards that triangle, he's weaker. In the same way, if I got behind him and pushed towards that point of the triangle, he'd be weaker. So Yip Man can help you get out and around and get in a position where you go against the weakest part of the opponent's stance. Now, some other ways that I use Yip Man, let's say that we're in Lap Sao. And from the Lap Sao cycle, if I were to, for example, shoot you through and then go to the body, now if I want to trap that hand and get the triangle, I use Yip Man footwork, so now I'm standing in between his feet and it's easy for me to push him backwards. So you can see that from position, what I did was I shot and then I pull punched here. Now, in order to get better leverage on him, I took a side step, circle in, and right down the center. Now I'm going against his power, against his weight. All right, another way to use Yip Man is as an inner sweep. So, for example, in a situation where I get a 1-2, stopping with here, and then going into my trap and retrap, I can Yip Man circle in to take the guy's balance with a sweep from the inside. So what I did was I went from here, and it wouldn't matter how I got into this position, but the important thing is taking a side step, circle through, and use your heel to knock the guy's leg open. Now, I use a similar sweep when we're open like this. Say, for example, I've kicked to the groin, and I put down here. Now, I showed in the Chung Q form how you could use that to sweep them open, and that opens up the groin or the kidneys to attacks. So that was a combination of the Yip Man idea together with the cross stomp that was in the Chung Q form. All right, another way to use Yip Man as a sweep is to come in, say, for example, after the pak da and the hit here, just come in and take the leg that way. So you're circling your leg out and around. So all I did was, once I worked my way in, was to step around and apply pressure in two different directions to take his balance. All right, next I'm going to talk about tall ma guai jian, step slide with that downward arcing elbow. So sometimes I pivot with it and sometimes I step. An example of when I might use the step slide with that movement, it could be if we were closed. For example, if he jabbed and I used do sao here. I tried to step through and chop him, but he blocked me. This would be an ideal situation for me to step slide and use that elbow strike. And again, my hand is underneath, simulating that do sao, and again, chambered for that next shot. So, it could have just been here, here, and there. That's one of the times I would use that. Now, any time that you really just need a small step to get your elbow in, you could use that movement. Example, again, would be if I had gotten inside somehow here, I could just collapse my arm and then step slide and butt him with the tip of my elbow. All right, now another way I can use the step slide and combine with the pivot, just like it is in the form, is to grab and pivot, and when he stops that shot, step slide into that next one. So that's almost directly out of the form because you pivot into the first one and then hit him with the second one. So there's another way. Now, one of the ways of using this also is when your one hand is trapped. In certain situations, the opponent will have your arm pulled, and he's controlling your yang power. So I can't really punch with this hand as long as he's pulling on that arm, because there's not going to be much behind it. That's because he's controlling the yang side of my power. You'll understand that more when you see the theory tape. But in any case, I can't really punch with any good power at this situation. But what I can still do is step in with my elbow. Or in this situation, when grabbed here, I can't really punch well when he controls my power and he's pulling me. I can't get any punch power. But I can collapse inward and use the guai jian. So it's a good movement to use when your hand is trapped. All right, next I'm going to talk about the gang jam sao, which is gang sao on the low line, on the yin side, and jam sao on the yang side. Now what this does is it completely sweeps the whole area in front of me. Now one of the ways I like to use this from open is, for example, when Gavin gives me the 1-2, I'd stop the first one and then sweep it out of the way and then jam the second one. So again, it was here, clear the way for that second one. Now if the second shot would have been low, it could have been here, and then that one would have taken care of it while the second one hit. So there's a way that you could use it in that manner. Now in sticky hands, if you ever find yourself in double fuk sao, what you can do is spread into gang jam and then go into your hit. So you can push his hands across the line with both hands at the same time, closing him off and then going in. All right, now another way I would use gang jam sao is to take and cut in half the movement. So instead of doing both hands at the same time, one hand could go gang jam, gang jam. Now this could work in a couple of different ways. One could be against a low-high punch, high and then low. so I could use it that way, just to block 2 shots. Or if the low punch was first, it could be low and then high is the hit. See, in this case, I included his hand. All right, now another thing that this brings to mind is it's the root of the gangda motion. All you have to do is substitute a punch for the jamsao, and there you have gangda, which is to block low and hit high. Now, I use gangda in a lot of different ways. One example would be if Gavin had given me the hook and I stopped it here, the uppercut came, then I could use gangda to stop it there. So slowly what I did was from position here, I snapped down into the gangda. Now if we were closed and he just threw a shot down low at the body, I could use gangda there, or if it would have been the other hand, it would have been the same thing, gangda right there. So what you're mainly worrying about doing is sending the block down first, and when the line is clear, punching through. All right, next I'm going to talk about chamsao, the sinking hand block. So from position here, I circle in and chop almost straight down. So it's something like jam, but it's more downward. Now I use it usually like I would use hangsao, but against an uppercut type of a punch. In other words, I showed at Silim Tao level that if I punched the face and a straight punch came to the body, that I would come down with the hangsao motion to exclude it. But if I had punched here and an uppercut type of a motion came, then I use chamsao to stop it at the root. And that's also painful to the opponent's arm. So again, from here, it's chopped down. Now, I also use that sometimes as a run. If, for example, the opponent uses jamsao to stop my punch here, I can then run around and use what's called chamda, or knocking the hand down. And that kind of pulls him down into the shot. See, the more I push down on his arm, the harder he gets pushed forward into that punch. All right, another way I like to use the chamsao is after my opponent, say for example when he slips and bobs underneath my jab, I can catch him on the way down the chamsao. So again, he slips out and around and down onto him. Now, anytime I get a hold of his arm from the inside here, I can use that to chop down on the inside of the arm and then follow up. So it's an attack to the arm in that way. All right, next I'm going to show another way that we use that loop into the chamsao motion as a reverse headlock. Now you do this when you break down the opponent's stance when you're in the open relationship. For example, after having done a bong and grab chop, successfully hitting him, if you swept that leg out to get him broken down a little bit, you can slip into a reverse neck lock here. You have your choice of different ways you could break his neck right now. Kick that leg out from under him to break, attack the body. You know, there's a number of different ways that you could go from there. All right, now, besides being used as chamsao, again, like all Wing Chun blocks, you can put a fist on the end of that block and make a punch out of it, the outside whip punch. Now, in Silim Tao, we had the inside whip. Now we're having the outside whip, which is the other half of the figure 8. Now, some of the ways that I would use that. Say, for example, I had chopped at Gavin and he blocked inward. I could then run around to a punch from the outside in. So what I did was here, run my hand around and punch the open line. So I use it that way. Now, in Silim Tao, we were doing an inside whip. Say, for example, when he punched here, I'd go with an inside whip and punch. But if his guarding hand is up, there's really no point unless you intend to trap or something else. But if you do this and you see that guarding hand is up, you just whip to the outside and you go around the guard. So that's one of the other ways we use it. All right, now in Chiso, from position here, I'll sometimes use the outside whip to circle around and hit in that position with Hunsao. Then I'd follow up. So what I did was I dropped out. And actually, when Gavin feels me drop out, he should be trying to hit me. That's what I want because it helps me trap his arm. Then from here, I just follow up. All right, next I'm going to talk about Tutsao Chapkun, or rubbing my arm down as I punch low. There's a number of different ways I use that. Now, one of the ways I might use it, if Gavin was punching low at my body, I could use my own arm to burn inside his and just knock it outwards with Kun Su Kun. Just like I showed at Silim Tao level, we knocked the guy's hand inwards here. In this one, we're doing the same thing, but on a low level. Now, if, for example, I had punched low and he used gumsao to stop me here, then I could, if he pushed me well across the line, I could thread through and hit to the body right there. So that's one of the times I would do it. From here, just thread right through and attack low. Now, in the same way, if I had done the gumsao against his punch, that punch came low here. If it was my gumsao, I could still do the same thing again and hit the body there. So it's another way of taking over when the center line is crossed. Another time I might do it is if I threw a low punch and he did a cross gangsao here, then I could just keep his hand out with that same punch. But in each of those movements that I'm showing, whether it's me blocking his punch and then pushing him through, or him blocking my punch and me pushing him through, or him blocking my punch with gang and me pushing him through. Each time my forearm is burning along his arm as it excludes or pushes him out. All right, next, after the Chutsao Chapkin, I open the hand, circle, squeeze, 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 release. Now that movement there also can simulate a punch and a hair grab. So for example, if my opponent was bent down and I had done this movement here, then I could simulate grabbing that person by the flesh or the hair and then bam, hitting with that chopkin to the side of the head. Now that low grab like this is obviously meant to be a flesh grab. Now, as I told you before, you can grab different areas of the body and close on the flesh, and it's a very painful trap. Now, as cruel as it might seem, one of the ways that you might want to use this, say for example against this punch here, if you went in and hit to the groin, you then take and grab the flesh. I'll just grab the pants, and then there's a trap there where you're pulling. That also works from the back the same way from underneath. You'd actually grab underneath and pull the guy into a trap this way. So they're telling you that, nothing is sacred in Wing Chun. If you have to hit low, you can still grab and, use that as a pull strike or a pull throw. All right, next I'm going to talk about the frontal version of Faksao, the upward chop. Now, the way I normally use this is when Bong Sao is too weak to be used, it's spent, or for some other reason I can't use Bong. What will happen in certain situations, say for example, I punched and Gavin did Bong. Here, if I leap down and he goes to punch me, I can't use Bong now. Besides, I wouldn't want to use cross Bong. I also can't use Biu. It's too late. So that's where Faksao would come in. So in a situation like that, you'd use Faksao. Now, slowly, I went here, leaped down, and then chopped up to stop that shot. Then I could finish up in a number of different ways. So I can use it that way. Now, I also use front Faksao if my arm gets pressed down, like in the Biu Sao, in the gum switch. Anytime here, when Gavin presses my elbow down, I can use that to stop a shot. See, from a downward press position. I know I can do that because in order to hit me, Gavin has to release some pressure on that hand. He can't do both. If he does, he'll come up short. So I know that I can use Faksao when that hand is spent. So that's one of the times that I would use the frontal version of Faksao. Now, another time I might use that frontal Faksao is as an attack. Example would be, once I'm in here, say that punch comes at me, and I get stopped on this line here. I can use frontal Faksao to chop upwards. So I can use it that way. Or, if I get a hold of that hand here, I can use frontal Faksao to attack to the joint. So that's a very painful way to hurt someone's arm. If Gavin uses Bong Sao against my jab, I can use frontal Faksao to open the line for a punch to the low. So what I did here was ran right up underneath and lifted it, and as I did so, boom, hit to the body. That's called Fak Da. All right, next I'm going to go into the Faksao from the side, which is a little bit different. It's a little bit longer range motion. Now, one of the ways that I use this is when I'm attacked from the rear. If a punch comes from either hand from the rear, whether it's that hand or the other hand, I can go into a Faksao, which stops that punch and then goes into a trap. The other hand, it stops that punch and then goes into a trap. So that's defense against a guy trying to hit you from the back. Now again, it could be an upward chop in certain situations. When I'm dead close after the punch here, and I'm in here in this situation, and that hand comes here, again, I'm real close, I can use it in the same way I use that other frontal Faksao, but from the side, coming up underneath the chin. So that's another way I might use it. All right, next I'm going to talk about, from the Chum Sao motion, Hin and back into Wu Sao. So it might look to the observer that I'm doing Pak, but I'm doing Wu Sao. It's the same movement I did in Siu Lim Tao, Hin, Wu, but with a pivot attached to it. So what I'm really learning to do is to apply Yang power to a Yin motion. In other words, a motion that would normally go with the pivot is, in this case, going almost against it. You'll understand more when I talk about reference in the theories tape. But for right now, let it suffice to say that I'm adding Yang power to a Yin motion. Now, the time when you might need to do such a thing would be, for example, if I were open here and he threw a 1-2, but the second one was a chop. Once I blocked that first one, if that second one was a chop, a straight block won't do it. See, I'm going to get hit. So what I need to do here is apply some Yang strength to a Yin block, because that strike, that second strike, is angular. It's not coming in straight. So I need to change my focus from the center line, which is at Gavin's core, to instead directly focusing on that strike that's coming in. So again, it went here and then there. Now, in the same or similar way, if we were closed, and I needed to get that same kind of yang power in my yin block against a real strong angular hit, would be against a 1-2, the second one being a hook. When that first one comes, tan-da, the second one, there, I needed some yang power into that wu-sao. I needed some strong energy. So in that case, I used the same kind of a movement, that snapping of yang energy into the wu-sao. So again, I went tan, and then tan-pak. All right, next I'm going to go into the guaijian, chamber, and then shoot low. Now, some of the ways that I would use this, again, from a situation where I've gone packed out and I was stopped, I might go here, shoot high, and then shoot low. Now, in the next section of the form, I go the same movement, but then the next one is high. So it's dependent on what his reaction is. In other words, when I come in with that first one, and then I shoot that second one, if he goes up to block it, then naturally I'm in good position to go low. If instead, when I go with that first one, and he goes, and I go with that second one here, and he does not block it, that leaves this line open. Now, again, if I had gone here, and he stopped me in that situation, I could just go here, go high, and if that high line's open, go high. Or, here again, if I go in with the hit, and I go high, but this hand comes up to stop me, then I go low. So you just chamber depending on which way his hands are. Wherever his hands go, that's where your hands don't go. You want to go low when he goes up, and you want to go high when he goes down. Now, if you notice also in that movement, I'm like this. I have this chambered movement like that. Now, there's a couple of ways of using that too. One is in sticky hands. What I can do in sticky hands is open that line with my hand like that. So I just scoop it open and then go in with a hit. If we were closed and he shoots the punch in, again, I use that to open that low line for the strike. So I use it there. I can also use it against a tight hook or a round kick. Say my hand is fully extended and Gavin's going to use a tight hook to my ribs. There. So he wants to hit me there. I can use this to bang down on the forearm and finish him off with a number of different moves. And again, if that round kick were coming when my arm was extended, wham! I can use that backward cutting elbow to hit right into his shin and finish up. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Bil Jee sao. What I'm doing here is shooting 3 Bil sao about eye level using the fingers to shoot straight ahead on the center line. Now, some of the ways that I could use this, it really doesn't matter what he decides to do. In other words, what I could do is shoot Bil sao to attack, and if he blocks me, pull into one, pull into another. Or it could be that he blocked the first one and the second one, and I still pull into the third one. It could be that he blocked the first one, and then when I went for the second one, he blocked that, and I could shoot through that way. So there's another way. Now, if we were open, and I did the first one and he did a jam sao, then I could shoot through there, and then again here. Now, if I did the first one, he did jam, and then I shot through and he blocked it with the other hand, here, then I could shoot through there. So that's another way I could go. All right, next I'm going to talk about the long bridge spade palm. Now, you notice what happened here is I turned my body and then I whipped my arm, just using the shoulder and the wrist and a little bit of a twist. So it's another long bridge motion, but instead of using the wrist and fingers to close and get more power, I'm using a twist of the hand as well as a twist of the body and a torque to whip horizontally. Now, some of the times when I would use that might be, let's say if we were open and Gavin threw the back fist at me, after using the tan-pak motion to stop that, I could go in with a long bridge hit to the throat. So you can see that my hand was extended here, and then I just shoot straight in. Now, in sticky hands, when Gavin goes to pull punch on me, here, once I've stopped it there, it's the same situation. I shoot in long bridge, and then again I have the trap. So slow motion, when he came in, I blocked, and then from here, just using a short pivot on my body and a long bridge hit, I go to attack. Now, sometimes in sticky hands, as I showed in an earlier tape, Gavin could do what's called quack sao, spreading my hands and hit me in the body. So one of the ways at Bil Jee that you defend against such a motion is to run into a hit. Now, that works in single. Even if you just did the one hand and circled it, wham, you can run into that long bridge movement. Also from in close, anytime you're too close to get any real power, you can long bridge swing it out and swing out and around his guard to hit him. All right, another way I use the long bridge motion after the Biu Sao, almost straight out of the form, but in an emergency situation, is when I get headlocked. Say, for example, I'm locked up here. What I can do after softening him up with a flesh grab and a stomp is reach around, get a hold of his eye or flesh of his mouth or anything like that, pull him backwards, then shoot through Biu Sao, just like in the form, and then again, long bridge to attack there. Then you can just take that foot and down he goes. All right, another way to use this motion in conjunction with that little hip cock, that little chamber of the hip from earlier in the form. Say, for example, after the bong here, once I've hit down low to the body, and I'm very close to him in this situation, I can sort of use a little bit of that hip chamber and then wham, unload the long bridge attack here. Or again, from right here, I could just unload right in there with the long bridge hit. All right, next I'm going to talk about the double grab and pivot here with the long bridge double sim lap sao. Now, what I normally do is use an extended grab when I want to pull the guy off balance diagonally. Now, in lap sao, you've learned two different ways to grab as of yet. When the first one from the punch here, the regular way would be to pull him to your hip. The second way I showed you was to pull him across so that you could expose the ribs or you could leak underneath. Now, this way is the third way. From here, you pull him across to pull him off balance into another shot or to expose a different part of the body. So I use it there. Now, sometimes in sticky hands, I use that double grab, just as it is in the form, to open him up diagonally here for a knee shot. So what I did from here is I just came out and around, double grab, knee, pulling him diagonally into the shot. Now, another way I like to use this movement is to pull him and expose his back. Say we were open and he threw a back fist at me. Once I stop that shot here, I can grab and pull him diagonally to expose the spine to a kick. So here again, I'd be here, kick, and then take that leg. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Bil Jee Kung, the ginger fist. It's called that because the surface of it resembles the ginger root that's used a lot in Chinese cooking. The way the edge has that scalloped, sort of sharp, rounded edge to it. Now, one of the ways that I would use it straight out of the form would be to go from the diagonal pull here, which pulled them across, and then right through the body, just as in the form. Now, in the form, it's followed up by tan sao, in this case as an iron palm strike. So again, straight out of the form, I could pull across, hit through, and then wham, bring that tan sao down on the back of the neck as a strike. So that would be one of the ways we could use it. Now, other ways I'd like to use it, when we're real close, like a clinching situation, I can use it here to attack the body in that same manner that I talked about Fuk Sao at Chung Kyu. You can use it as an adductive strike coming in towards the body in tight. If we were open and I was in tight here, I could use it there to the back here, or in here to the side of the neck. Now the same thing goes for the floor. It's one of those hits that comes toward the body, and it's more powerful used on the floor. Another way I like to use this movement, let's say we were open, and if Gavin was giving me the jab, with Pak Sao here, I can use that to attack to the inside of the arm. So as it's coming into me, wham, I can attack here and kind of deaden the arm. Same thing against this punch. It's there and then attacks right in there. Now you could also slip in tight here and push that over and attack to the neck. Or with that one, slip over it and attack to the neck this way. So these are a couple of ways that you could use it. Now if we're closed and he gives me the jab, sometimes I'll use it here. And again, let's try it this way. He gives me the jab right there and attack to the throat with that edge of the hand. So you see as I'm pulling him in and attacking him here. All right, I want to talk a little more now about that tan sao. So after whipping here, then whipping down to tan. That has that iron palm feel to it. What you try to do with your tan sao here is to whip it so that you really get sort of a sizzle going with your hand. Now you use that in a number of different ways. Whereas in Siu Tao open, I would have gone bong, tan da, pak punch. At Chung Kyu level, or rather at Bil Jee level, I might go bong, tan as a hit. So I'd intercept that second punch with the other hand, leaving this open for the strike. Now this type of a hit with the back of your hand is using iron palm or a heavy hand. I might use it here when the jab comes. I could go and attack to the body here. Or if we were closed, I could use it from this type of a position across the back of the ribs, or the back here. Like I said, the back here, this is the face, or across the temple. So you'd use a heavy-handed motion to attack different areas of the body with that iron palm strength. All right, next I want to talk about the Pao Jiang used here. So after the whip across, whip down, the Pao Jiang here, which is a lifting use of the forearm. Now there's a couple of ways I can use that. I use it as a forearm strike or just as a regular strike on the low level. Now, using it straight out of the form again, the whole sequence, in the form, I went double pull here, then I could have used that earlier. Now, if I use this as a hit, I could come up and use that same palm strike or down in the low line. So, again, I could have pulled across here, hit, then hit here, and then wham, down on the low line. So that would be straight out of the form. Now, another way I might use that is to bring a raising forearm power. So I use that in a couple of different ways. One would be, let's say we're open, and I get a hold of Gavin's, say that jab comes here, and I'm here like this. I can grab on here and then use this bang to pop underneath and hit with my forearm. Now I can use that right off of this pun gang style here just by popping. So I can jerk them in, and then when I get them jerked in, wham, hit them with the forearm. I'll also use that at times from the punch here. You know, once I've gotten him in this type of position, I can just pop my forearm up while holding his shoulder in the opposite direction. So I use my forearm here to hit. All right, next I'm going to talk about chaesao, also called gum jian, pressing the elbow or retraction extension hand. There's a couple ways I use this. First off, after he jabs at me from bong, I can use it to press down to get him into a downward position so that I can either hit him on the low line or kick him. Now, another time I can use it is just to attack the elbow. Same way here, and just hyperextend his elbow, pushing and pulling, you know, or pushing and pulling him in so I can kick him. So there's one of the ways that I might use that. But the most important usage for chaesao is on the ground. Anytime in ground fighting, when I can, what I try to do is use the ground as a weapon. So what I try to do is take the supporting limb and then smash. So here, I try to pull his hand out and smash the head. Or, again, I might take this limb and smash the head. Or, straight out of the form, take this limb and smash the arm down into the floor. So I use it that way. Now, if Gavin were, for example, trying to kick me somehow on the ground, I might take his foot and then smash that knee or smash the foot. And what I normally do then is step on that limb. Now, again, on all fours, sometimes I'll take and I'll step on this foot, and then I'll use that as a smash here, and then again, there's a break, and then there's a smash. There's another smash. So there's a number of different ways you can use that push-pull action on the floor. All right, next I'm going to talk about the diagonal punch, which to the beginner, it might look like it's a hook punch. In a way, it's like a hook, but I am not facing a person right in front of me and hooking through the target. What I'm actually doing is facing that direction that I'm punching in. And I use this type of a punch. I'll use it quite often in sticky hands or any other time when I'm in a T relationship with my opponent. In other words, when he's there, I have to punch across my body or across my body like this. I use that all the time. You'll see it a lot in the sticky hands tapes. I finish off with that punch quite a bit. So I use it anytime my body is in a T relationship with the opponent. Now, an example of another time I might use it, if Gavin had used Jamsao against my jab here, I could run around to that punch. Again, I would use it here. So what I did was, when I felt that going in, I ran around, and there was the diagonal punch there, and then again, there it was. So it's the same kind of a punch each time with the run. Another time I used this with a press. Say, for example, his first jab came and I did bong. When the next one came, I used the Chum Q hyperextension. Then here, I'll push that down and go in with that diagonal punch. And there's another chance for using it right there. All right, next I'm going to talk about the whip into the Phoenix Eye, Fu Ngan Kun, which is a one-knuckle protruding punch. Now, you're bracing that knuckle with the thumb real tight so that it won't collapse. Now, you don't want to get the impression that you're always going to just hit with that one knuckle, although that one knuckle gets buried in deeper. Normally, I use the Phoenix Eye punch anytime when I'm in a punch situation. I just make that one knuckle protrude a little bit more. So, for example, my knuckles would still be hitting him in the face, but that one knuckle would go deeper into the target. Or I'd still punch him across the throat, but my one knuckle would get buried deeper into the target. It doesn't have to be this type of punch either. For example, I could mix it with Chow Kun, uppercut, and one knuckle going in deeper. Or Chop Kun, one knuckle could dig in deeper than the rest. So I use it that way. Now, if I want to blend it with, say, for example, Foxhound, or inside whip or outside whip, what I can do is put that Phoenix Eye on the end. So, for example, I could go upwards and attack with my knuckle here, or this way, or whipping that way, with one knuckle stabbing deeper into the target. But again, all the knuckles hitting. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Chum Sun, or sinking the body, where I reach down and then come up. Okay, let's just talk about the part where I go down first. sinking down here, but I try to look up as much as I can while I reach downwards. Now that's to simulate a couple things. One is that brings the forward headbutt into play. So I use headbutts like all the time. I use headbutts anytime I hit here, I can headbutt there. Or sometimes I like to get both hands and headbutt like this. So I use headbutts in a number of different ways like that. So the forward headbutt is something that's constantly being used in Wing Chun. Now besides the forward headbutt, you also have the idea of ducking. It means that in Wing Chun you're not expected to stand there and take the shot. You know, if all else fails, you're allowed to duck. An example of when you might want to duck would be, let's say he gets me in the stupid trap and he's about to hit me. Well, I could duck up underneath it. There's nothing that says I can't sort of bob and weave like a boxer would. So that's one of the other applications, is ducking. It could even be in an emergency situation. If I'm getting a guy that's about to kick me in the head with that round kick, I could duck underneath that and then get him from the other side. Wham! So there's a lot of ways you could use the ducking motion. All right, next I want to talk about getting up with the Wui Sun motion. So once I've sunken down, I throw my hands up first to get up. So like I'm down here and I throw the hands and then stand up. Like casting, like throwing a fishing line. And what I'm doing is I'm using the weight of my arms swinging to help me get up. So if, for example, I was in trouble, like I've been hit, it helps me stand up when my legs are a little bit weak. Now, getting up that way could also be a backwards headbutt. So, for example, when a bear hug is applied here, what I like to do is headbutt backwards and hit the guy in the face with my head. Then I'll stop, kick backwards, whatever it takes to get loose. But the first thing I do is use my head backwards to butt him. Now, another way that I use that getting up with my hands first is to protect my head when I've been knocked down. See, what you don't want to do when you've been knocked down is you don't want to get up with your head first, because you end up getting hit. The first thing the guy's going to do is hit or kick you in the head when you're down. So they're telling you to get up with a protective umbrella over your head. So if I'm down and Gavin goes to hit me, I get up and I can go into a lock with that swinging motion. Even if the other hand was coming, I can get up and go into a lock. So slowly, what I'm doing is getting up and throwing my hands up to keep me from getting hit. And then I'm using a lock. Or against the other hand, I'm getting up, hands overhead to protect my face before going into the lock. All right, next I'm going to go into the getting up with the kick, which is similar to the other two applications, but just adding the foot element. Now again, if I were down, I'd want to get up with my hands first and then get up to a kick. Or against the other hand, I'd want to get up hands first to a kick, so I could use it that way. Now, if the guy were trying to kick me, also after having punched me, with either hand, once I get up here, I could stop that kick and then go in. So I could use it that way. Now, it's also telling me that it's most likely that when we get up, we're going to use the opposite hand and foot. One hand extended, the opposite foot. That's for balance. In other words, let's say that we're closed. What I want to do, they're telling me, is that when a punch comes, I want to use the opposite hand and foot to stop it. The reason being, it's balanced. If I try to do both on the same side, I tend to lose my balance under pressure. So when there's a punch coming in, you don't want the same side. Now, the exception to that rule, for example, if I had done tanda here, it's okay on the second syllable to use the same side. That's because I'm not under any pressure. There's nothing that's knocking me backwards. So I can do this, but I would not want to do that. That would knock me back too easily. Now, another idea about using the opposite hand and foot is I'm using the Bil Jee Kung to deflect so that he goes off to the side. In other words, I'm not trying to stop him dead. I'm just trying to push him off the line and let him go. This teaches me to borrow power from the hands and put it into the feet so that he walks into the shot. What I'm doing is deflecting him, but letting his power come into my foot so I can use it that way. All right, now in the Chum Q form, I was talking about Bil Jee Kung Fu by itself. So when Gavin's hands were up, I showed you how to probe and then go in for your shot. Well, in Bil Jee, they have the same thing, but as you're probing, you're also kicking on the low line and then going in for your hand shot. So it's the same way. You're creating timing, but instead of just probing with the hand, you're also adding the element of the kick, which comes slightly after the hand. If I feel that everything's safe with my hand, they're saying you can come in on the low line with the kick faster than you could respond with the hand. So this motion right here, you're doing bong on the high line, and you're stomping with the cross stomp on the low line. Now, I talked about the cross stomp a little bit at Chum Q level, but there's some other applications for it here in Bil Jee. Now, one of the ways that I use that cross stomp is, first of all, when we're open, and I've worked my way in with whatever technique, and once I'm in close like this, I'll pull through like this, and then I'll stomp on the guy's knee. Now, another way is once I pulled through here, I can stomp this way with the cross stomp. So that's another way of hyperextending that person's knee. Or if we were closed, and I worked my way in, again, I could sweep it here, and then stomp on it right there with that cross stomp. So there's a couple of ways that I might use that. Now, another way I might use it, again, I showed it in the headlock. When Gavin has me locked up, I'll use this to brace the back of his foot, and I'll stomp my heel down on his foot. That's one of the ways I might use it. You know, anytime you sort of kick backwards and stomp on the guy's leg, it's that idea. Now, if I have an opponent who wants to back up on me, like step sliding back, and instead of chasing him as he walks backwards, what I'll do instead is stomp on his foot. That cuts his backing up short. So this is a way of trapping the foot, just like gum sao with the hand, but using the foot, sort of like a gum gyuk. So we use it in these different ways. All right, another way I use that cross stomp, after having used seat ma to sweep, if I stepped out to the side and then swept his leg up, I could step behind him here and push him down that way. So what I did, slowly, was I stepped to the side and then stepped in to sweep that foot. Then I used that cross stomp to step right behind him, and that locks up his leg and throws him right down. Then I can finish up with another cross stomp. All right, another way I use this cross stomping motion as gum gyuk or pressing foot is from sticky foot. Anytime I'm in a relationship here where my leg's touching his, I can then push down and go into a kick. From the inside, if I wanted to, I could push down, go into a kick. Or if he was trying to kick me, again, I could push down there and go into a kick. If I was touching the other leg, it'd be the same thing. Push down and go into a kick, or if he tries to kick me, push down. Or from the inside, again, run into a push down, go into a kick. So there's a few different ways you can use it there. Now on the ground, I also use this movement of the cross stomp here to attack various limbs. Like here, if I go to stomp on the guy's hand and like keep that and break the arm. I showed that a little while ago. I wouldn't hesitate in a street fight to stomp any part of the guy's body. I wouldn't even hesitate here to stomp on his head, if that's what it took. Stomping here or anywhere that you can on the ground. You can go with stomping motions. You can get around here. You can stomp on the guy's foot. From here, long range, you can stomp anywhere you can that's a vital area. Spine, or anywhere like that. All right, next I'm going to talk about the bong side kick. So from position, I stomp, and then I go bong sao and side kick. Now, one thing that I want to keep in mind is that when I'm doing a side kick, I don't want my elbow to be in the way. I don't want to like bump into my own elbow. So when I start to kick with a side kick, I automatically just turn my guard upside down to get it out of the way. Now I can also use that to deflect and kick. For example, when we're open and Gavin gives me the jab, I can bong side kick. When the cross comes, just finish off as normal. So again, that was bong side, tanda, retrap. Now if we were closed, I could use bong side kick. When the first one came here, second one, bong side kick, and then finish off as normal. So I went in here, and then there it was. Finish off as I fall. All right, next I'm going to talk about bong gyuk, which is the wing leg deflection. After I do my side kick here, I go down into this position here with my leg. Very similar to bong sao, bong gyuk. Now, it introduces the concept of blocking with the legs. Now, just as I have bong sao and bong gyuk, there's tan sao, tan gyuk, there's jut sao, jut gyuk, outside jut sao, outside jut leg. There's fuk sao, there's fuk sut. There's ding sao, there's ding sut. So the legs correspond with the hand movements in Wing Chun. Now the bong gyuk itself can be used in a few ways, and I'll show you a couple. One would be if we were closed, and if Gavin were trying to kick my rear knee with his rear foot, right in there. What I could do is just sweep that leg over and go in with the kick, with the hit rather. So what I did is deflect, kick, and hit. So I went bong and then straight in. It'd be the same thing against the punch. Bong, and go in with the hit, bong, and go in with the hit. So it's the same idea there. Now if we were closed, and Gavin was throwing that front kick at this leg, right there, I could again use bong gyuk and sweep it over. So what I did was just kicked upwards, in, and then went in with the shot. Now like I said, that introduces us to the concept of leg blocks. There's other ones. There's tan sao and tan leg. You see the way that the arm is shaped and the way that the leg is shaped is similar. And just as closed Tan Sao works here, if that round kick comes, Tan leg works the same way. Just as I would go Tan hit, I would go Tan hit. See? So I could use it that way. Fook Sao here has a corresponding Fook knee. So if the round kick goes to the groin, Fook knee stops it there and then goes in for the shot. So you can see there's a number of different hands that correspond with feet. All right, now the last thing that we do after having finished the form, putting the leg down, that introduces us to the concept here, standing on one leg, of finishing Siu Lim Tao again on one leg. In other words, I told you that you could leave out the end of Chum Kiu and the beginning of Bil Jee to create one long form. It would be like you do the whole Siu Lim Tao, but then you leave out the beginning of Chum Kiu and start Chum Kiu. So in other words, at the end of Siu Lim Tao, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then Chum Kiu starts. Then at the end of Chum Kiu, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, hit, hit, and then this would be the first of Bil Jee. See? And at the end of Bil Jee, you're supposedly, after finishing, Bong Sao Bong Gyok. And you would think that, okay, I'm doing my Bong Gyok position now. So I guess that tells me that I could either close the form, or it means that I guess I could just go ahead and do my Siu Lim Tao form all on one foot and go through the whole form like that. So you'd be doing your Siu Lim Tao form on one foot, and you could start the whole cycle over again. Now if you can do the whole Siu Lim Tao form on one foot, on both sides, after having done both forms, you will have had a pretty good workout. Now that concludes my explanation of the three forms. So I hope you stay tuned for the next tape. We're going into drills.